Now we're definitely making progress on this thing, getting closer to lighting it all the time. And I was just about to put the oil pan up, and then I realized, hey, wait a minute. This could be something interesting for you guys that are following this from a technical standpoint. I want to talk about some of the crazy things that oil does inside of a blown nitro motor. Before I do that, I'll give you an update on everything else. So I've been working on the fuel system, running lines, making stuff all fit together the way it has to be. And the next video, I'm going to give you a complete tour of everything that's going on here. But yeah, it's just tedious, running lines, hunting for fittings and stuff like that. Couple of other small details on this I wanted to bring up. The first is that we're using a 1/2-inch pitch belt here, and 1/2-inch pitch belts and 8mm belts, very similar, should not be run to the outside of an idler pulley. They should always go to the inside of the idler pulley. And that's because they have a very shallow reach into the teeth of the blower pulley. So they'll want to ratchet. By running the belt to the inside of the pulley, you get an extra 4 or 5 teeth of contact. This is set up the way it is right now because this just happens to be the belt that we've got, and we can start the engine and do all of that. But we'll eventually want to switch this to a shorter belt that can be run to the inside. So that's that. And then there was something I wanted to point out early on, and I completely forgot, but I'll do it now. The front cover. So this is a normal early Hemi front cover. It's a gear drive, but the pattern of it is normal. And this will fit all in normal passenger car and industrial 331s, 354s, and 392s. But it doesn't fit this one because this is a marine block. And the marine blocks have a different water passage set up. They use a different cover and water pump. On the other engines, the openings for the water ports are right here. And on this engine, they're actually under this cover. And these bolts right here, this one and the same, its twin on the other side, are actually screwed into concrete. They're threaded into concrete because that's where the water passage is. It's just one thing after another with this particular engine. But remember, we've got another one at the machine shop being prepped so that once we've gone through the baby steps, we'll convert over to that one, and then all should be well. But what I did with these bolts, I mean, what are you going to do? I want them in place, if nothing else, to act as dowels and add some support for the gasket in case the crankcase gets pressurized. We don't want the gasket pushing out. So I epoxied, I just dipped the bolts into some JB and then shoved them in place. There's no other way to do this. So for the time being, they'll be okay. They'll act as dowels. They'll act as support for the gasket, but it's just more stuff, more auction. Everything that comes through an auction is like this. All right, so that's the setup with that. Also in the back, we've had this together and apart probably, I don't know, a half a dozen times, getting the can to fit right, clearancing for the throw-up bearing with the cross shaft. We had the reverser and everything in here. Dr. Art had it all together, but the coupler that they sent is 2 inches too long, so we're waiting for the correct coupler for that. So all of this is still happening. It's still happening. All right, so let's talk about oil and this oil pan and why these engines are different from every other engine you'll ever encounter. These are different. The way they treat oil is different. So we just got this pan back from Jeff's friends over at DBR Performance over in Spring Hill, and they added this deceleration baffle for us. So this is just a standard passenger car early Hemi oil pan, and it's supposed to hold 5 quarts of oil from the factory, but it doesn't have any sort of baffling, deceleration baffling. So we had to add this so that when Jeff hits the brakes or the chute, the oil doesn't all just go running away from the pickup and rushing to the front of the engine. So this shelf right here should keep a couple of quarts in place for the slowdown. But as I said, that's a 5-quart pan, but we'll be putting 10 quarts into it. Actually, we're going to start with 10 and possibly go to 11, 12, just depending on how this thing acts. So, now, when I first started screwing around with nitro cars as a helper, just cleaning oil pans and stuff like that, back around 1985, I found it puzzling that they would deliberately overfill the crankcase. Now, I was working with mostly funny cars at the time, and funny cars use an extremely shallow oil pan, 3 inches at the front, 5.5, 6 inches at the back, and 5 or 6 quarts fills them completely. But yet, typically they would get overfilled to 10 or 12 quarts, an entire case of oil, which would actually submerge the crankshaft just as it's sitting normally. They would have a windage tray like every other high performance engine, but the tray was there really just to keep the oil from foaming around the pickup. They wanted a liquid oil down there, and they didn't really care what happened up top. And I found it puzzling. I was like, why? Every other engine, you want to eliminate windage. You want to keep the oil out of the crank and the rods, the whole reciprocating assembly. You want to keep it down below because that robs power. And this is just the common thing. And when it applies to gasoline or alcohol engines, that's exactly right. You want to keep all the oil you can from getting caught up in the mix. Not on a nitro engine. So when I first started working on these cars, I didn't really question it. I was like, okay, well, this is just the way it is. You throw a case of oil in this super shallow pan and send it. And I guess I attributed it to maybe oil dilution. There's so much oil dilution from the nitro during the course of run. Maybe you need that volume of oil to compensate for the dilution. Never really gave it much of a thought. It was just a standard accepted practice. So, fast forward about a dozen years later, and it's the late 1990s, and the NHRA mandates that fuel cars have to have a dry sump oiling system. Now, at the time, I was mostly involved in match race cars and IHRA cars, and that dry sump rule didn't apply to the IHRA cars. So, but I knew it was coming, you know, because anything the NHRA does, the IHRA is a year or two behind. At least that's the way it was back in the day. So they introduced this rule for the dry sump oiling systems. And then all of a sudden, there's chaos and carnage like I've never seen before. I had never seen before, and probably hasn't been since. But as the big show meaning the NHRA cars, went to the dry sump oiling systems, a couple of things happened like immediately. First, the tune-ups became completely erratic, where it would be kind of normal occasionally for a car to drop a cylinder going down the track. Dropping a cylinder means that it doesn't fire anymore, so it's just pumping liquid. They're kind of normal, you know, it's just a thing that you deal with. But as soon as they went to the dry sump systems, it became an epidemic. Cars were dropping cylinders, many cylinders, multiple cylinders, 2, 3, 4 cylinders, like right off the starting line, which was very unusual. It's a period of the highest load. They usually stay lit at that point. But the tune-ups became very erratic, and top-end explosions from hydraulicing started to happen because there was so much unburned fuel being cycled through. So the carnage was crazy, but that was only part of it. All of a sudden, our supply, so we were the little guys, and we would buy secondhand parts like connecting rods and crankshafts and stuff like that. Secondary, so they dried up. There was no parts available because where typically a big show car, an HRA car, would get, I don't know, half a dozen runs out of a set of rods, 10 runs out of a set of rods, and they would cycle them out, and they would check for shrinkage. A little known fact, on a nitro motor, the aluminum rods don't stretch, they shrink. So anyway, we would typically be able to pick up used rods off these guys for next to nothing and then put another 10, 20 runs on them. Well, all of a sudden, that supply dried up. And the big show cars that had gone to the dry sump oil system were exploding bottom ends like there was no tomorrow. 1 or 2 sets on a set of connecting rods, throw them away. They're done, okay? Crankshafts used to last, 10, 15 runs like that. 2 runs, throw it away. The bottom end carnage was insane. One of my favorite from this period of time was Bernstein. There was one run, I forget which race it was, but he threw all 8 rods. You can imagine that. You know, it's like to throw a rod or two, right? Threw all 8 rods out of the engine. And these rods weren't just breaking as they would normally break, you know, at the rod bolt or in the middle of the shank, and then you got big chunks of connecting rod. No, all of a sudden these rods were coming out in chunks like they shattered. It became apparent to me at that point why the standard practice was to overfill the crankcase. It was because that oil, that case of oil that you were sticking into a pan that would only hold 5 or 6 quarts, was acting as a vibration damper. The level of harmonics in one of these engines when they're under load is pretty insane. And if you service these cars for any amount of time, you'll find that they'll do weird things all through the car. The level of harmonics, the vibrational noise that travels through the engine and through the frame rails and all of that, like you'll find that there are specific bolts that'll be like holding the front axle in place that'll loosen up every run. And you're like, why? Why would this bolt loosen up? It's just because of the way the harmonics traveled through the engine and the frame rails to that particular point, and those bolts became the focal point and they would loosen up. That's one of the things that Nitro cars do. That's how they keep you on your toes. There's always crazy stuff going on, and it all has to do with the level of harmonics, the noise that these things create when they're underpowered. So it became obvious to me at that point that the reason for this excessive overfilling of the crankcase was to act as a damper. And now remember, when you take a case of oil and you're going to stack, let's say, 8 quarts of it up against the back of the crankshaft while the engine is running, you stand on the throttle and all that oil goes right to the back and it stacks up against the back of the engine, and it's all caught up on the last 2 or 4 cylinders. Well, that's sucking the harmonics out of it. And the same thing with the crankshaft. It's keeping everything, it's sucking a lot of the bad vibes out of this thing and keeping it alive. And also, it takes a tremendous amount of power to muscle through a case of oil wrapped around the back of the crankshaft, 70 weight oil. So when they went to the dry sump systems and they took that away, that load away, well, all of a sudden the engines weren't seeing the same load that they were, and they would be just dropping cylinders and motoring through on 5 and 6 cylinders because that load was taken away. And of course, it took a short amount of time for the tuners of the era to get a handle on it. But for that first season that everybody went to the dry sump, my God, it was just absolute bedlam. At that point, I was done with this stuff. I walked away just at exactly the point where the dry sump systems had taken over. So anyway, that's where we're at with this thing. We used to use a Kendall Nitro 70 oil. I don't even know if it's still available. I know that Jeff has secured some 70 weight oil for this thing. So that's what we'll be using. And then we'll just see how stuff evolves as it goes on. And like I said, I wanted to show you the deceleration baffle and just a quick thing on how oil acts completely different in a nitro motor than it does in any other sort of engine. So, as of for now, I have to find more lines and find more fittings and continue plumbing this thing. And the next update, that's what we'll do. We'll talk about the whole path of the fuel system, and actually something that I'm not crazy about, but we're going to do anyway. Next video, well, I'll get deep into it. All right, I hope you got something out of that. I'll see you tomorrow.